the war is over. Hooray, the fight is won. Back from the life of a rover, back from the roar of the gun, back to the dear old homeland, home with peaceful dove. Don't let us sing of the war anymore, just let us sing of love. Hooray, the war is over. Hooray,
Ah, there you are. I'm just reacquainting myself with your diary. There are, of course, too many berries and superlatives. It's hard to believe that you've been accepted at Oxford based on this, but otherwise it reads like an unvarnished account.
I'm glad you think it's good enough.
Oh no, not good, but interesting, mind you. I think it's worth publishing with a sub-edit, if you don't mind, of course.
By all means. You seem to know what you're doing. There's lots of books here. Do you write?
Perhaps you could call it that, but you'll come to see that writing is not something I accept as easily accomplished, but something which I have laboured at. I'm struck in reading your diary by how down you are on the officers.
I fear I was a narrow-minded prig. I often think my fellows must have had a good deal to put up with.
Priggish superiority.
I was ignorant of the strain that some of them had been through in previous fighting. Some of them had been in the Boer War, of course.
I thought your comment that they had gone into tanks as a way of avoiding fighting was breathtaking in its disparaging insolence. Do you still mean it?
If you're going to publish the diary, I would like you to cross it out. I am ashamed, but perhaps you should let it stand as a monument to my effrontery.
As long as it serves as a reminder of what we are really like, and not a slur on them. Otherwise, I fear that much of the diary will appear to be an exercise in sheltering your complacency from the chilling blast of truth. The diary protects us from the truth, rather than conveying it.
I was so scared, and that did not fit with being a soldier. I couldn't even be sure of what it was I was frightened of. Death? Being terribly mutilated? Going mad? I was mostly hoping I would not run away. I know I feared it even before I knew what action was. When we left Bovington, the Padre preached a sermon to the whole battalion. His text was, "Soldiers, be content with your wages." He remarked that some of us might think it a peculiar choice.
Indeed.
And we marched down to some stirring military tune, whose name I forget.
Bollocks, bollocks, and the same to you.
That's not what it's called. March Militaire, perhaps. I say, it's a bit odd you remembering words like bollocks after all these years. And an Oxford education, you say?
Once priggishness wears off, perhaps it simply becomes socialised as pornography.
I hated playing the band playing Old Acquaintance and Home Sweet Home.
I had forgotten the brigadier shaking hands with all the officers.
It was a bit embarrassing, manly gesture and all that. I wonder if that was what made them so rude to Henry V before Agincourt. It was a bloody night on the Osterland.
All I remember about Le Havre was the astonishment of the waitress on being asked by Green to bring some tea cake avec la vitesse de l'antelope.
I didn't think it worth mentioning. I was fond of Green, a barrister and a wit. I remember as we marched through Le Havre, they were surprised to see such a large body of men. When they saw our regimental badges, I heard one of them say, "Mitrailleurs." We had the machine gun corps insignia to avoid advertising that we were actually tanks. We suspected that there were German spies in the crowd.
The anticipation of arriving in Le Havre could not have prepared you for the horrors to come. I would say this is where your diary works best. It transports us back. You might say it bears witness. The shelling was simply one continual roar. Your own guns sounded a sharp crack behind you. You could, of course, distinguish nothing. You simply had the deep roar of the guns, which was continuous, and imposed on that was the shrill whistle of the shells passing overhead, just as if it was wind whistling through a gigantic keyhole. It sounded like an express train coming through a tunnel and gradually increasing roar as it came nearer. Then a deafening crash. It was a weird business, the heat and the nightmares out of which one started up suddenly in a kind of horror to find the sweat pouring down one's face. It was almost impossible to distinguish dream from reality.
The tat-tat-tat of the German machine guns would chime in with your dream with uncanny effect, so that when you awoke you wondered whether you were dreaming. It did not take long for interest in life to die out. Soon I found myself almost hopeless. I used to lie on my back and stare at the low roof. Sometimes I stared for hours at a small piece of mud that hung from the roof that quivered from the explosion of shells.
Fear of fear was common to all, the officers and the men, but the inability to admit to anyone for fear of being guilty of spreading despondency and alarm was worse.
Even in the company of a crowd, the loneliness was intense. I can still feel my skin drawn over the bones of my face, as if it were the mask of a cadaver. The occasional words exchanged echoed like a conversation from afar. Guns sound a bit frisky. Awful, but cheer up. You'll soon be dead.
Knew only too well that if you relaxed your grim, determined jaw, your teeth would chatter. Do you think your senior officers had fears that likewise needed to be masked?
They died, but we were killed.
Perhaps I'm too comfortable now, but your self-pity doesn't leaven. It's flatulent, but you have a point. I remember at least being indignant. I have come to call them the establishment, the big E, and certain gross words are appropriate to describe it. But behind your anger there is something far darker and disturbing.
While I have been writing the diary, I have been having a recurring dream.
Go on.
In the dream, I'm always clinging to the slimy bank of the river Steenbeck. In the dream, I'm slipping and I hold on to the bank by digging my fingers into the mud, as the vast raging torrent of the river is 20 feet below. As I become fatigued, I move to ease myself. This only causes me to slither further down, closer to the torrent.
In the diary, you describe the trickle of dirty water as a geographical fact?
Yes.
Your dream and description disguises the fact that the crossing of the Steenbeck swallowed up many an English soldier. In other words, your diary sanitizes the truth. It's not dirty water, but rather death itself. There are other things that you have left out of the diary. It seems that in the short term, even before you go to Oxford, you have managed to forget or eradicate some memories.
What are you thinking of?
Well, this surprises me, but I seem to have retained these memories in my gut, as if I can still smell and taste them. Long before Reeps, when you were asleep on the stone floor of the farmhouse that had been levelled in previous fighting, there was that sickly sweet stench of corpses.
Yes, I remember, and the corpse in shell hole that sheltered us. His bluey-green skin stretched tight over the bones of his face, his mouth pulled open by the contraction of death.
I renewed acquaintance in the dissecting room at medical school.
So that's what you've been up to. Medicine.
Among other things.
Did medicine save you? Or should I say, save me?
No, but right now, if I'm correct in thinking, you are unable to work.
Yes, I can't face it.
So, you swim, you play rugger, and so on?
Yes, something to focus on.
So it's your athletic skills that save you, not medicine. And yet it's difficult to know how to enjoy games. Occasionally friends take you out to listen to music, and you rather admire the musical talents of others, and secretly you wish to be released from your athletic prowess. But you know deep down it is your life belt.
I admit I am anxious and troubled at my good fortune in coming out unscathed. I have my athleticism, but so many have so much less.
It's called survivor guilt.
Cohen, Stokes, and to a lesser extent Quainton suffered disaster. I somehow felt that this should have been befallen to me.
Indeed, survivor guilt. Actually, I met Quentin quite by accident in Oxford. It was many years ago now. He had changed from the cheerful, frank fellow whom you had envied for his easy capacity for friendliness. He had become a timid, cautious, scared apology for a man. He would say nothing of what had happened to him in the war.
And what will become of me?
There might be some who would have said you deserved the Victoria Cross, but actually I think if you'd been given the VC it would have toppled you into a breakdown.
The DSO was hard enough to swallow. At the ceremony I was embarrassed to meet my crew. It seemed so ridiculous that I should be singled out. When our tank was hit and I climbed out with the Lewis gun, it wasn't so much bravery but self-preservation. We were low on ammo, but I could see the chief enemy fire was coming from the woods ahead, so I opened up there. I ordered foreman to keep fire to the left to keep me from being hit from that side. Pretty quickly the enemy scattered, but then they led a counter-attack, and my gun jammed because it was too hot, so I came off the tank in record time and made for the trees. No, not so much an act of bravery, but rather self-defence and self-preservation.
But your actions were honourable. Column, Alum and Pell scrambled to safety with your cover. Over the years, people will talk about your actions with gravity and sentiment, and it will be part of the respect that will walk before you. You will not speak of it, though, not because of mystery or modesty, but rather you will always struggle with the prospect of being attacked or wrecked by honour and success.
I think I'm not prepared for survival. We weren't really prepared for victory.
I can tell you there will be another war, where the good fortune of survival will once again be frittered away.
You sound like you're grousing as much as me. Are you not blaming the establishment that you talked about? Gross words and all that?
Yes, it does sound a bit like that. But no, I do not blame the establishment. It is us I blame, all of us. Victory seems to be regarded as desirable because it leads to an opportunity to sink into a slumber again. I have learned that the real warfare is between wisdom and oblivion, and from that warfare there can be no escape, and perhaps nor should there be.
So, what else will I get up to?
Let me not say too much, for it would spoil the necessity of discovery, but I can tell you there will be some happy times ahead, though no, not all will be happy thereafter. Indeed, tragedy shall haunt you not once, but twice more. Madness and nameless dread will occupy your waking hours, much in the same way as your recurring dream of the Steenbeck River stirs your sleep. But you will learn to aspire to the love that a mother holds for a child, and in the end you will live a life filled with knowledge, and shall accept your burdens as a source of strength.
I have one more question for you.
You may indeed, but right now our time is up.
Not time for one more question?
No, worry you not, young fellow. All will be revealed. After all, I am but the thoughts that you will soon enough think.
Hooray, the war is over. Hooray, the fight is won. Back from the life of a rover. Back from the roar of the gun. Back to the dear old homeland. Home with the peaceful dawn. Don't let us sing about war anymore. Just let us sing of love.